A man and his wife were spending the day at the zoo. She was wearing a loose-fitting, sleeveless pink dress with straps. He was wearing his usual jeans and t-shirt. As they walked through the ape exhibit, they passed in front of a large silverback gorilla. Noticing the wife, the gorilla went crazy. He jumped on the bars and, holding on with one hand and 2 feet, he grunted and pounded his chest with his free hand. He was obviously excited at the pretty lady in the pink dress. The husband, noticing the excitement, thought this was funny. He suggested, "Now maybe pucker your lips and wiggle your bottom. See what that does." She played along, and the gorilla got even more excited, making noises that would wake the dead. The husband then suggested she let one of her straps fall to show a little more skin. She did, and the gorilla was about to tear the bars down. "Now, show your thighs and sort of fan your dress at him," he said. This drove the gorilla absolutely crazy, and he started doing flips. The husband smiled sweetly at his wife as he opened the cage door and shoved her in. "Now tell him you have a headache." Ever since I was a child, I've always had a fear of someone under my bed at night. So I went to a psychiatrist and told him I've got problems. Every time I go to bed, I think there's somebody under it. I'm scared. I think I'm going crazy. "Just put yourself in my hands for 1 year," said the psychiatrist. "Come talk to me 3 times a week, and we should be able to get rid of those fears." "How much do you charge?" £80 per visit, replied the doctor. "I'll sleep on it, and if needed, I will come back to you," I said. 6 months later, the psychiatrist met me on the street. "Why didn't you come to see me about those fears you were having?" he asked. "Well, £80 a visit 3 times a week for a year is an awful lot of money. A bartender cured me for £10. I was so happy to have saved all that money that I went and bought myself a new SUV. "Is that so?" With a bit of an attitude, he said, "And how, may I ask, did a bartender cure you?" "He told me to cut the legs off the bed. Ain't nobody under there now." An air traffic control tower suddenly lost communication with a small twin-engine aircraft. A moment later, the tower landline rang and was answered by one of the employees. The passenger riding with the pilot who lost communication was on a cellular phone. He yelled, "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday!" The pilot had an instant and fatal heart attack. I grabbed his cell phone out of his pocket, and he had told me before we took off he had the tower on his speed dial memory. I am flying upside down at 18,000 feet and traveling at 180 miles per hour. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. The employee in the tower immediately put him on speakerphone and said, "Calm down. We acknowledge you and we'll guide you down after a few questions. The first thing is not to panic. Remain calm." He began his series of questions. Tower: "How do you know you are traveling at 18,000 feet? Aircraft: "I can see that it reads 18,000 feet on the altimeter dial in front of me." Tower: "Okay, that's good. Remain calm. How do you know you're traveling at 180 miles per hour? Aircraft: "I can see that it reads 180 miles per hour on the airspeed dial in front of me." Tower: "Okay, this is great so far, but it's heavily overcast. So, how do you know you're flying upside down?" Aircraft: "The pee from my pants is running out of my shirt collar." A man drinks a shot of rum every night before bed. After many years of this, the wife wants him to quit. So she decides her course of action. She gets 2 shot glasses, filling one with water and the other with rum. After getting him to the table that had the glasses, she brings his fishing bait box. She says, "I want you to see this." She puts a worm in the water, and it swims around. She puts a worm in the rum, and the worm dies immediately. She then says, feeling that she has made her point clear, "What do you have to say about this experiment?" He responds by saying, "If I drink rum, I won't get worms." A plane passed through a severe storm. The turbulence was awful, and things went from bad to worse when one wing was struck by lightning. One woman lost it completely. She stood up in the front of the plane and screamed. "I'm too young to die," she cried. Then she yelled, "If I'm going to die, I want my last minutes on Earth to be memorable. Is there anyone on this plane who can make me feel like a woman?" For a moment, there was silence. Everyone stared at the desperate woman in the front of the plane. Then the cowboy from Texas stood up in the rear of the plane. He was handsome, tall, and well-built, with dark brown hair and hazel eyes. Slowly, he started to walk up the aisle, unbuttoning his shirt as he went, one button at a time. No one moved. He removed his shirt. Muscles rippled across his chest. She gasped. Then he spoke. "Iron this, and then get me a beer." A blonde lady motorist was about 2 hours from San Diego when she was flagged down by a man whose truck had broken down. The man walked up to the car and asked, "Are you going to San Diego?" "Sure," answered the blonde. "Do you need a lift?" "Not for me. I'll be spending the next 3 hours fixing my truck. My problem is, I've got 2 chimpanzees in the back that have to be taken to the San Diego Zoo. They're a bit stressed already, so I don't want to keep them on the road all day. Could you possibly take them to the zoo for me? I'll give you $100 for your trouble." "I'd be happy to," said the blonde. So the 2 chimpanzees were ushered into the back seat of the blonde's car and carefully strapped into their seat belts, and off they went. 5 hours later, the truck driver was driving through the heart of San Diego when suddenly he was horrified. There was the blonde walking down the street, holding hands with the 2 chimps, much to the amusement of a big crowd. With a screech of brakes, he pulled off the road and ran over to the blonde. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "I gave you $100 to take these chimpanzees to the zoo." "Yes, I know you did," said the blonde. "But we had money left over, so now we're going to SeaWorld." If you think for 1 second you've got a bad job on your way home from work, stop at your pharmacy. I want you to go to the thermometer section and purchase a rectal thermometer made by Johnson & Johnson. Be very sure you get this brand. When you get home, lock your doors, draw the curtains, and disconnect the phone so you'll not be disturbed. Change into very comfortable clothing and sit in your favorite chair. Open the package and remove the thermometer. Now, carefully place it on a table or a surface so that it will not become chipped or broken. Now the fun part begins. Take out the literature from the box and read it carefully. You will notice there is a disclosure in very fine print that reads, "Every rectal thermometer made by Johnson & Johnson is personally tested and then sanitized." Now, close your eyes and repeat out loud 5 times, "I am so glad I do not work in the thermometer quality control department at Johnson & Johnson." Have a wonderful day knowing that no matter how bad it is, there is always a job that's more of a pain than yours. Once, there were twin brothers by the name of Jones. John Jones was married, and Joe Jones was single. The single brother Joe was the proud owner of a dilapidated rowboat. It happened that John Jones's wife died the same day that Joe's rowboat, filled with water, and sank. A few days later, a kindly old lady met Joe and, mistaking him for John, said, "Oh, Mr. Jones, I am sorry to hear of your great loss. You must feel terrible." Joe smiled and said, "Well, I'm not a bit sorry. She was rather old from the start. Her bottom was all chewed up and she smelled of dead fish. Even the first time I got into her, she made water faster than anything I had ever seen. She had a bad crack and a pretty big hole in her front, and that hole got bigger every time I used her. It got so I could barely handle her, but if anyone else used her, she leaked like anything." The thing that finished her was 4 guys from the other side of town. They came down looking for a good time and asked if I could lend her to them. I warned them she wasn't so hot, but they could take a crack at her if they liked. Well, the result was the crazy fools tried to get inside her all at once, and it was too much for her. She cracked right up the middle. Before he could finish, the old lady fainted. A man walks into a pet shop and says to the owner, "Okay, I want to buy a pet, but I don't want a boring or normal pet. No cats, dogs, or birds. I want something different." The pet shop owner informs him that he has a talking centipede. "Really?" the man replied. "How much?" The owner informs him that the talking centipede is $50. Happy with the unusual offering, the man pays the money and takes his new pet home. On getting home, he lays the matchbox with the centipede in it on the table, opens it and says, "Hey, mate, fancy going to the pub for a few drinks?" The centipede says nothing. Figuring it must be tired from the journey, he decides to leave it for an hour and try again later. An hour later, he opens the matchbox and says, "Hey, mate, fancy going to the pub for a few drinks?" The centipede again says nothing. Starting to get suspicious, the man decides he will give it one more hour, and if the centipede doesn't talk, he will take it back to the shop for a refund. An hour later, the man opens the matchbox and says, "Hey, mate, fancy going to the pub for a few drinks?" The centipede says, "For f***'s sake, I heard you the first time. I'm putting my shoes on." A small boy named Arthur lived in the local village. None of his classmates liked him because of his stupidity, especially his teacher, who was always yelling at him, "You are driving me crazy, Arthur." One day, Arthur's mother came into school to check on how he was doing. The teacher told his mother honestly that her son is simply a disaster, getting very low marks, and even she had never seen such a dumb boy in her entire teaching career. The mother was shocked at the feedback and withdrew her son from the school and even moved to another town. 25 years later, the teacher was diagnosed with an incurable cardio disease. All the doctors strongly advised her to have an open heart operation, which only one surgeon could perform. Left with no other options, the teacher decided to have the operation, which was successful. When she opened her eyes after the surgery, she saw a handsome doctor smiling down at her. She wanted to thank him, but could not talk. Her face started to turn blue. She raised her hand, trying to tell him something, but eventually died. The doctor was shocked and was trying to work out what went wrong. When he turned around, he saw Arthur, working as a cleaner in the clinic, who had unplugged the oxygen equipment to connect his floor scrubber. Don't tell me you thought that Arthur became a feckin' doctor? It is a slow day in the small Minnesota town of Hibbing, and the streets are deserted. Times are tough, everybody is in debt, and everybody is living on credit. A tourist visiting the area drives through town, stops at the motel, and lays a $100 bill on the desk, saying he wants to inspect the rooms upstairs to pick one for the night. As soon as he walks upstairs, the motel owner grabs the bill and runs next door to pay his debt to the butcher. The butcher takes the $100 and runs down the street to retire his debt to the pig farmer. The pig farmer takes the $100 and heads off to pay his bill to his supplier, the co-op. The guy at the co-op takes the $100 and runs to pay his debt to the local prostitute, who has also been facing hard times and has had to offer her services on credit. The hooker rushes to the hotel and pays off her room bill with the hotel owner. The hotel proprietor then places the $100 back on the counter so the traveler will not suspect anything. At that moment, the traveler comes down the stairs, states that the rooms are not satisfactory, picks up the $100 bill and leaves. No one produced anything. No one earned anything. However, the whole town is now out of debt and now looks to the future with a lot more optimism. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how a stimulus package works. An Irishman walks into a bar in Dublin, orders 3 pints of Guinness, and sits in the back of the room, drinking a sip out of each one in turn. When he finishes them, he comes back to the bar and orders 3 more. The bartender approaches and tells him, "You know, a pint goes flat after I draw it, and it would taste better if you bought one at a time." The Irishman replies, "Well, you see, I have 2 brothers. One is in America, the other is in Australia, and I'm in Dublin. When we all left home, we promised that we'd drink this way to remember the days we drank together. So I drink one for each of me brothers and one for myself." The bartender admits that this is a nice custom and leaves it there. The Irishman becomes a regular in the bar and always drinks the same way. He orders 3 pints and drinks them in turn. One day, he comes in and orders 2 pints. All the other regulars take notice and fall silent. When he comes back to the bar for the second round, the bartender says, "I don't want to intrude on your grief, but I wanted to offer my condolences on your loss." The Irishman looks quite puzzled for a moment. Then a light dawns and he laughs. "Oh no, everybody's just fine," he explains. "It's just that my wife had us join that Baptist church and I had to quit drinking. But it hasn't affected my brothers, though." A mother, accompanied by her small daughter, was in New York City. The mother was trying to hail a cab when her daughter noticed several wildly dressed women who were loitering on a nearby street corner. The mother finally hailed her cab and they both climbed in, at which point the young daughter asked her mother, "Mommy, what are all those ladies waiting for by that corner?" The mother replies, "Those ladies are waiting for their husbands to come by and pick them up on the way home from work." The cabbie, upon hearing this exchange, turns to the mother and says, come on, lady, tell your daughter the truth. For crying out loud, they're hookers." A brief period of silence follows, and the daughter then asks, "Mommy, do the hooker ladies have any children?" The mother replies, "Of course, dear. Where do you think cabbies come from?" After a night out, I dropped the wife off and drove the babysitter home. As we pulled up outside her house, I turned to thank her and noticed she was struggling to find the door handle. I stretched across, my arm softly brushing against her breast. "Oh, sorry about that," I said apologetically. "That's okay," she replied, with a certain glint in her eye. "I liked it." I thought to myself, she's up for it. Do I take a chance? As I nervously moved forward to kiss her, she slowly closed her eyes and opened her mouth. Our tongues met. I slipped my hand up her skirt, and before I knew it, we'd had the most mind-blowing love in the car. After, I breathlessly said, "Thanks, Mom. Same time next week. Yeah?" This is a story about a couple who had been happily married for years. The only friction in their marriage was the husband's habit of farting loudly every morning when he awoke. The noise would wake his wife, and the smell would make her eyes water and make her gasp for air. Every morning she would plead with him to stop ripping them off because it was making her sick. He told her he couldn't stop it and that it was perfectly natural. She told him to see a doctor. She was concerned that one day he would blow his guts out. The years went by, and he continued to rip them out. Then one Christmas Day morning, as she was preparing the turkey for dinner and he was upstairs sound asleep, she looked at the innards, neck, gizzard, liver, and all the spare parts, and a malicious thought came to her. She took the bowl and went upstairs, where her husband was sound asleep, and gently pulling the bed covers back, she pulled back the elastic waistband of his underpants and emptied the bowl of turkey guts into his shorts. Some time later, she heard her husband wake with his usual trumpeting, which was followed by a blood-curdling scream and the sound of frantic footsteps as he ran into the bathroom. The wife could hardly control herself as she rolled on the floor laughing, tears in her eyes. After years of torture, she reckoned she had gotten him back pretty good. About 20 minutes later, her husband came downstairs in his blood-stained underpants with a look of horror on his face. She bit her lip as she asked him what was the matter. He said, "Honey, you were right. All these years you have warned me and I didn't listen to you." "What do you mean?" asked his wife. "Well, you always told me that one day I would end up farting my guts out. And today it finally happened. But by the grace of God, some Vaseline and 2 fingers. I think I got most of them back in." One dark night in Dublin, a fire started inside the local chemical plant. In the blink of an eye, it exploded into massive flames. The alarm went out to all the fire departments for miles around. When the firefighters appeared on the scene, the chemical company president rushed to the firemen in charge and said, "All our secret formulas are in the vault in the center of the plant. They must be saved. I will give £50,000 to the fire department that brings them out intact." But the roaring flames held the firefighters off. Soon more fire departments had to be called in as the situation became desperate. As the firemen arrived, the president shouted out that the offer was now £100,000 to the fire station that could bring out the company's secret files. But still the firefighters could not get through. From the distance, a lone siren was heard as another fire truck came into sight. It was the nearby rural township volunteer fire brigade, composed mainly of old men over 65. To everyone's amazement, that little run-down fire engine roared right past all the newer sleek engines that were parked outside the plant. Without even slowing down, it drove straight into the middle of the inferno. Outside, the other firemen watched as the old-timers jumped off right in the middle of the fire and fought it back on all sides. It was a performance and effort never seen before. Within a short time, the old-timers had extinguished the fire and had saved the secret formulas. The grateful chemical company president announced that for such a superhuman feat, he was upping the reward to £200,000 and walked over to personally thank each of the brave firefighters. The local TV station caught the thank you on film and asked the chief, "What are you going to do with all that money?" "Well," said Patty, the 70-year-old fire chief. "The first thing we're gonna do is fix the brakes on that bloody fire truck." There is an overweight guy who is watching TV. A commercial comes on for a guaranteed weight loss of 10 pounds in a week. So the guy, thinking, what the hell, signs up for it. Next morning, an incredibly beautiful woman is standing at his door in nothing but a pair of running shoes and a sign about her neck that reads, "If you can catch me, you can have me." As soon as he sees her, she takes off running. He tries to catch her, but is unable. This continues for a week, at the end of which the man has lost 10 pounds. After this, he tries the next weight loss plan, 15 pounds in a week. The next morning, an even more beautiful woman is standing at the door in similar conditions. The same happens with her as with the first woman, except he almost catches her. This continues for a week, at the end of which he, as suspected, weighs 15 pounds less. Excited about this success, he decides to do the master program. Before he signs up, he is required to sign a waiver and is warned about the intensity of this plan. Still, he signs up. The next morning, waiting at the door, is a hulking 300-pound muscle man with nothing but a pair of running shoes, a raging erection, and a sign around his neck that says, "If I catch you, you're mine." The man was supposed to lose 25 pounds in the week. He lost 34. A woman decides to have a facelift for her 50th birthday. She spends $15,000 and looks sensational. On her way home, she stops at a newsstand to buy a newspaper. Before leaving, she says to the clerk, "I hope you don't mind my asking, but how old do you think I am?" "About 32, is the reply. "Nope, I'm exactly 50, the woman says happily. A little while later, she goes into McDonald's and asks the counter girl the very same question. The girl replies, "I'd guess about 29. The woman replies with a big smile, "Nope, I'm 50. Now she's feeling really good about herself. She stops at a candy shop on her way down the street. She goes up to the counter to get some mints and asks the assistant the same burning question. The clerk responds, "Oh, I'd say 30. Again, she proudly responds, "I'm 50, but thank you." While waiting for the bus to go home, she asks an old man waiting next to her the same question. He replies, "Lady, I'm 78 and my eyesight is going." Although when I was young, there was a surefire way to tell how old a woman was. It sounds very forward, but it requires you to let me put my hands under your bra. Then and only then I can tell you exactly how old you are. They wait in silence on the empty street until her curiosity gets the better of her. She finally blurts out, "What the hell? Go ahead." He slips both of his hands under her blouse and begins to feel around very slowly and carefully. He bounces and weighs each breast, and he gently pinches each nipple. He pushes her breasts together and rubs them against each other. After a couple of minutes of this, she says, okay, how old am I?" He completes one last squeeze of her breasts, removes his hands, and says, "Madam, you are 50. Stunned and amazed, the woman says, "That was incredible. How could you tell? I was behind you at McDonald's." Patty's wife awakes during the night to find that her husband is not in their bed. She puts on her robe and goes downstairs to look for him. She finds him sitting at the kitchen table with a hot cup of coffee in front of him. He appears to be in deep thought, just staring at the wall. She watches as he wipes a tear from his eye and takes a sip of his coffee. "What's the matter, Patty?" she whispers as she steps into the room. "Why are you down here at this time of night?" Patty looks up from his coffee. "I'm just remembering when we first met 20 years ago and started dating. You were only 16. Do you remember back then?" he asks solemnly. The wife is almost reduced to tears herself, just thinking how caring and sensitive her husband is. "Yes, I do," she replies. Patty pauses. The words were not coming easily. "Do you remember when your dad caught us in the back seat of my car?" "Yes, I remember," said the wife, lowering herself into a chair beside him. Patty continues. "Do you remember when he shoved that shotgun in my face and said, 'Either you marry my daughter or I'll send you to jail for 20 years? "I remember that, too," she replies softly. He wipes another tear from his cheek and says, "I would have gotten out today." An elderly Florida lady did her shopping, and upon returning to her car found 4 males in the act of leaving with her vehicle. She dropped her shopping bags and drew her handgun, proceeding to scream at the top of her lungs, "I have a gun and I know how to use it. Get out of the car." The 4 men didn't wait for a second threat. They got out and ran like mad. The lady, somewhat shaken, then proceeded to load her shopping bags into the back of the car and got into the driver's seat. She was so shaken that she could not get her key into the ignition. She tried, and then she realized why. It was for the same reason she had wondered why there was a football, a frisbee, and 2 12-packs of beer in the front seat. A few minutes later, she found her own car parked 4 or 5 spaces farther down. She loaded her bags into the car and drove to the police station to report her mistake. The sergeant to whom she told the story couldn't stop laughing. He pointed to the other end of the counter, where 4 pale men were reporting a carjacking by a mad, elderly woman described as white, less than 5 feet tall, wearing glasses, with curly white hair, and carrying a large handgun. In a crowded city at a busy bus stop, a beautiful young woman wearing a tight leather skirt waited for a bus. As the bus stopped and it was her turn to get on, she realized her skirt was too tight to allow her leg to reach the height of the first step of the bus. Slightly embarrassed, and with a quick smile to the bus driver, she reached behind her to unzip her skirt a little, thinking that this would give her enough slack to raise her leg. She tried again to take the step, only to discover that she couldn't. So, a little more embarrassed, she once again reached behind her to unzip her skirt a little more, and for the second time attempted the step. Once again, much to her embarrassment, she could not raise her leg. With a little smile to the driver, she again reached behind to unzip a little more, and again was unable to take the step. As this was happening, a large guy who was standing behind her picked her up easily by the waist and placed her gently on the step of the bus. The woman went ballistic, turned to the would-be Samaritan and screeched, "How dare you touch my body? I don't even know who you are." The guy smiled and drawled, "Well, ma'am, normally I would agree with you, but after you unzipped my fly 3 times, I kind of figured we were friends." Patty came home late. Patty staggered home very late after another evening with his drinking buddy, Finney. He took off his shoes to avoid waking his wife, Kathleen. He tiptoed as quietly as he could toward the stairs leading to their upstairs bedroom, but misjudged the bottom step. As he caught himself by grabbing the banister, his body swung around and he landed heavily on his rump. A whiskey bottle in each back pocket broke and made the landing especially painful. Managing not to yell, Patty sprung up, pulled down his pants, and looked in the hall mirror to see that his butt cheeks were cut and bleeding. He managed to quietly find a full box of Band-Aids and began putting them on everywhere he could see blood. He then hid the now almost empty Band-Aid box and shuffled and stumbled his way to bed. In the morning, Patty woke up with searing pain in both his head and butt, and Kathleen staring at him from across the room, she said, "You were drunk again last night, weren't you?" Patty said, "Why would you say such a mean thing?" "Well," Kathleen said, "it could be the open front door, it could be the broken glass at the bottom of the stairs, it could be the drops of blood trailing through the house, it could be your bloodshot eyes, but mostly it's all those Band-Aids stuck on the hall mirror." The woman entered the room, and with a knowing smile teasing her full lips, she sank into the comfort of the plush chair in the corner. The handsome stranger turned, having sensed her approach. Locking his steely gray eyes on hers, he moved slowly toward her, his experienced gaze measuring her, hypnotizing her with his soft murmurs of assurance. He sank to his knees before her and, without a word, smoothly released her from her constraining attire. With a sigh of surrender, she allowed his foreign hands to unleash her bare flesh. He expertly guided her through this tender new territory, boldly taking her to heights she had never dared to dream of, his movements deliberate, confident in his ability to satisfy her every need. Her senses swam. She was overcome with an aching desire that had gone unfulfilled for so long. And just as it seemed that ecstasy was within her grasp, he paused, and for one heart-stopping moment she thought, "It's too big! It will never fit!" Then, with a sudden rush, it slid into place, as if it had been made only for her. As pleasure and contentment washed over her, she met his steady gaze, tears of gratitude shining in her eyes. And he knew it wouldn't be long before she returned. Oh, yes, this woman would want more. She would want to do it again and again and again. Don't you just love shopping for shoes?